universities in 1992. Madam has been a member on various expert committees, and over last 3.5 decades, Madam has presented many prominent research papers, and she has been a resource person and a panelist in many reputed panels, and she has visited and given perspectives in various countries and various fields. Ma'am, we are extremely lucky to have you and your viewpoints on this relevant theme. Over to you, Dr. Vibhuti Patel, ma'am, and we are very anxious to hear from you. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Ma'am, your mic.
First of all, I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Assocation and the organizing team of July College, and also Dr. Shiva this week, who has been for just 1 week. And as Madam told us that today I'm going to speak on Union Budget 22-23 from the social sector and gender perspective. Now I would like to share my this should be on entire screen or window. Yeah. What should I click?
Ma'am, the screen is not visible. Yeah.
Can you see?
Uh,
Can you see the
yeah. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
full screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so as you can see in this graph, the Union Budget 2022-23 has been much discussed, and I think as Professor Aarti Sukeja told us that right from the 1st of February till now, the number of articles from various stake groups, because you have a pie of a growth and which sector gets what. And there was a time where only chartered accountants and the corporate world was discussing budget. And when I was a child, like we used to hear, the people would go to Brabant Stadium and to listen to experts on the budget. But now the awareness about union budget has increased among all sections of society, whether they are elderly people or women or youth or transsexual minorities or working class farmers. All of them, they discuss union budget. So this time we have seen that the social sectors, especially, they have shown great awareness about budget, and from 1st of February till now, lot has been discussed. And you can see that as compared to all other sectors like the transport and infrastructure and this thing, they have got more weightage. Capex has got more weightage, but the social sector budget is deplorably low because social sector affects nearly 80% of Indian population. We all know that the budget makes a crucial contribution. It represents the financial plan, and it is the most significant policy instrument of our government for establishing macroeconomic stability, fiscal efficiency, strategic priority, and most importantly, for the ensuring equitable distribution of the resources of the country. Because budget, the revenues of the government comes from the people. There's the taxpayers. We all are paying various types of tax. We pay income tax, professional tax, excise duty, GST, this whole revenues generated by the state has to be utilized for the welfare of the country, for the best interest of the country. And we all know in economics that maximum welfare for maximum number of people, whether it is in short term or long term, that has been the goal of public expenditure. Simply put, it is policy-making tool of the government to translate government's objectives of equitable growth, inclusive growth into the programs and services to achieve socio-economic developments of the country. budget classification system, as we see that, we know that if you read, anybody opens the budget book, and now it is so easy because everything is in public domain, it is one click away. So the budget classification system provides a normative framework for both policy decision making and also the social accountability. Because it is a public's money, it is also it has to be used, that you are accountable of what kind of utilization you are making, how you generate revenue, and how you use this government expenditure, how is it allocated. That is, we are accountable for that. So classifying expenditures and revenues correctly is very, very important. One, so for that we need a policy formulation and performance analysis, allocating resources efficiently among different sectors: agriculture, industry, infrastructure, service, public health, social sector. These are very important components of the overall budget. Ensuring compliance with the budgetary resources approved by the legislature. Whichever budget you make, your elected representatives have to pass it. So if it's a budget of the local self-government body, so your municipal corporation has to pass it. If it is the budget of the state government, and the legislative assembly has to pass it. And if it is a union budget, it is the parliament of the country which has to pass it. Now, fourth very important aspect is also day-to-day administration of the budget, because budget allocates funds, functions, and functionaries. How this are utilized over a period of 1 year, that is very important. Now, how do we define social sector? Because my focus is on social sector, which is the most neglected area in the budget discourse. So I would like to focus on social sector budget, because the overall social sector spending, which includes food security, education, health, well-being, employment, skill enhancement, housing, social protection and social welfare of elderly, persons with disability, sexual and religious minorities, and economically weaker sections of the society, and underserved communities such as scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. That means, on the whole, social sector budget is investment in people. Now, coming to another aspect, which also I am going to include, which is a more than 50% of India's population, gender responsive budgeting. And when we talk about gender, we are not only talking of men and women, we are also talking of transgender. That means gender responsive budgeting is extremely important, because we have a goal of gender equality, for which the first step is poverty alleviation. After that, we need good governance, so that there is whatever is allocated is not gone in the leakage and corruption. Accountability has to be there, how you spend the money, whether it is reaching the targeted population or the funds are diverted. You all know that when the funds for scheduled caste plan in Delhi state were diverted for Commonwealth Games, and there was a big uproar. So you can't divert whatever is earmarked funding, it has to be used for that particular cause. Transparency has to be there. You can't be secretive about the funds and allocation. People discuss everything, but only when the matter of finances come, whether it is in our personal life or in our office or in a public life, that's what people are generally secretive about, the money matters. So there has to be transparency. There has to be economic efficiency. It is not like using the fund and it's like pouring water in a sand, because if you pour water in a sand, nothing will grow. So you need to use the fund very efficiently and create an ambience of equity. So equity is creating an atmosphere, creating an ecosystem where you can reach equality. Okay, so treating everyone equally is also unjust. You can't treat a child and adult in the same way. Child needs more protection. The elderly people need more protection. Those who are underserved and historically neglected, they need affirmative action. So equity is very important to attain equality. Now, when we talk about gender responsive budgeting, I think it's a new discipline. Only from 2005, Government of India adopted gender responsive budgeting and made it mandatory for all ministries and departments to provide the quarterly report of how they have used the budget responsibly and gender sensitively. But still, there are only 18 states in our country who have been able to do gender responsive budgeting. Capacity building is very, very important. The majority of the states have not even started the process, though the GR about gender responsive budgeting came way back in 2005 when Mr. Chidambaram was finance minister. So gender budgeting is not a separate budget. We are not asking for a separate budget, but it is a dissection of the government budget to establish its gender differential impact, to translate gender commitments into budgetary commitments. Whatever we are talking about, Constitution, Article 14, 15, 16, directive principles about gender concerns, if you want to utilize them in a market economy, nothing can be achieved without money. So you need a budget, you need funds, you need functions, you need functionaries. Use of public economics to reduce gender gap. There are very important areas in which we have gender gap, whether it's in education or health or food security, safety, employment, skills. Everywhere we see major gap. Even in the midst of pandemic, the men's work participation has more or less now reached the pre-pandemic era. But 40% of women who were in the workforce, they have not got job. Okay, so there are differential impact. Disaster also impacts different sections of society differentially. Reprioritization of public spending. If the public spending is blind, it is not sensitive to gender concerns, you have to reprioritize and bring the gender angle into it. For example, PDS, if the moment, like when the new economic policy was adopted, they said that we would scrap PDS. And it was the women and elected representatives in Panchayati Raj institution. They said, then half of the India's families will starve. You can't do that. And then they had to reprioritize PDS, which is very important. Currently, we saw in the midst of pandemic, MG Nareka has been reprioritized. The massive reverse migration which took place, where even MBAs and engineers and MCOMs, they are standing in the queue for Narega. Because of the lockdown and after that the slowing down of the economy. So one has to reprioritize funding. Transparency and accountability for revenue generation. The revenue, the way you generate, you can't generate revenue by saying that we will development of casino will be the most important thing, or we will sex tourism, we will invite and on the basis of that we will exchange foreign exchange. Now these things have happened in the 80s and 90s historically in so many Asian countries, but we in India, the gender economists have said that this kind of revenue generation we don't want. We want revenue generation by supporting and strengthening real economy, where you create infrastructure, you have increase in agriculture production, you increase industrial production, you develop service sector. These are the way we want to generate revenues. And also the public expenditure, how do you make it? Another very important thing is to lift the statistical invisibility of unpaid care work. Lot of work which is done in terms of cooking, cleaning, caring of the elderly, caring of the sick, caring of children, collection of fuel, fodder, water. All these things are non-monetized and non-marketed. So these activities they are not considered as economists don't even include it, whichever way they count the GDP, whether it is an income method or production method or expenditure method, these things gets left out. So we need to lift the veil of statistical invisibility of care economy. And for the first time, Government of India has given us a time utilization study, how every individual in India spends the time in personal work, care work, and paid work. And you divide this your daily 24-hour clock into these three types of activities. Equality dimension. If you believe that every Indian citizen gets equal opportunity, equal treatment, and equal reward, then also gender budgeting is very important. And efficiency dimension, that if you leave aside 50% of India's population from your budgetary discourse and budgetary allocation and budgetary expenditure, then the country can never come up. All the studies have shown, even the World Economic Forum studies have shown, that the countries in which there is a higher work participation, higher inclusion of gender concerns in the macroeconomics thinking, those countries have a very, very high rate of growth. So from the whole exercise of gender responsive budgeting is to transform macroeconomic policies, whether it's a monetary policy or fiscal policy, to ensure gender justice, social justice, distributive justice as the promise that India has made in the Millennium Development Goals and also Sustainable Development Goals. So there is a 5-step approach to gender budget analysis. Analyzing the situation, you know that every time the budget is presented, it is also along with the economic survey. Why economic survey comes out one day before the budget? Because you know that you have a situational analysis of where our country stands. No, so it is analyzing in gender budgeting. You have to analyze the situations of men, women, boys, girls, transgender people in terms of education, nutrition, health, employment, skills, safety, transport, sports, and assessing their gender responsiveness of every sector's policy, whether it's agrarian sector or industrial sector or service sector or fisheries or forest produce. You have to see that to what extent these sectors are gender responsive. Assess the allocation. You may have a very good scheme, grant scheme may be there, but is the allocation adequate? So monitoring and spending of service delivery is also very important, whether the spending is done judiciously without any corruption and leakage, and all the services you have money parked in the ministry, but does it translate into service delivery? That is very important. Assessing the outcome is also very important of the budget. So gender responsive budgeting, there are 3 important steps: analysis of the budget from gender perspective to determine how differential impact of the budget on men, women, transgender, children, elderly takes place. Stage 2 is reformulating the budgetary policies and distribution of resources to achieve gender equality. And third one is the working systematically to embed gender within all budgetary processes. So that is very important. And as a result of in the gender responsive budgeting, there are 4 types of important schemes. Whenever you see any budget, you have to classify them in your mind, whether they are a protective or welfare services like pension of widows, destitute people, people who are homeless, rehabilitation centers for survivors of violence, like in Bombay during the pandemic. 13 government hospitals started one-stop crisis center for survival of violence as the cases of domestic violence escalated during the lockdown because of social isolation. Social services, budgetary provision for education, health, a daycare center for working people's children, working women's hostel, fuel, fodder, water, housing, sanitation, nutrition, midday meal. All these are social services. And the third one is the regulatory services, where the state commissions for women, women's cells in the police station and the government department, how are they operating? And creating awareness of all these programs, which is very important, because large majority of people, even elected representatives, they sometimes don't know that these things exist and the money remains unutilized. Currently, 84 countries in gender budgeting are doing gender budgeting. It first started by the students' movement in Australia way back in 1984. Because the Australian children in the industrialized world, children are asked to become economically independent at the age of 15, which is extremely dangerous for women, because at the age of 15, girl is so vulnerable, and how do they negotiate life? And that is why the students' movement and the youth movement had demanded gender budgeting. Australian government started doing that in 1984, and currently we see 84 countries in the world, in whether they are industrialized country or the developing countries, they are doing this budgeting. So the strategy of gender responsive budgeting, even social sector budgeting, one is that increase the budgetary allocation, improve the quality of resources input, provide training and capacity building to the elected representatives and bureaucrats and administration, redistribute the budget allocation to strengthen the social sector and gender budgeting, change the type and quality of goods and services delivered by the government, and change the policy, which will result in changing the policy outcomes. So this is the process. You have a global call, your United Nations and the international organizations, they start discussing this issue. Local initiatives take place. Then gender sensitivity training takes place. Livelihood and support services for the social sector, they are also provided by the government, nation states. And violence against women, anytime you bring a change, then there is a violence in the society, and how to assist the survivors of violence. And as a result of this, what we see that the greater people's participation, as we have seen this year also, the people's participation, as I will be showing it in the coming slides, that you would be able to see the different sectors have responded. Now, gender audit of budget in our country, which started with the Towards Equality report in 1974, which was debated in the parliament. And then we had series of policies like a 6 5-year plan included a chapter called Women in Development. Shram Shakti report came out in 88. National Perspective Plan for Women was adopted by the government of India for the 88 to 2000 year. Ninth 5-year plan demanded that there should be women's component plan. The way we have a scheduled caste plan, we have a tribal sub plan, we should have a separate women's component within the budget. And the 10th, 11th and 12th 5-year plan, they also demanded component plans should converge with the gender responsive budgeting. So we need gender responsive budgeting mainly because of the historical injustices that we have had. And that's why it becomes very important to raise the citizens' awareness, change the budget and policies, programs in gender, and make the governments accountable. At one level, we talk about man as a breadwinner, but it is the women who are shouldering the major burden of the day-to-day survival. She's kept illiterate. There is a lower wages she's paid. 92% of women are in the informal sector. They are doing unpaid care work, the care work which they do, cooking, cleaning, carrying, collection of fuel, fodder, water, looking after the sick and elderly. They are doing, which is not even paid. Women have a high maternal mortality rate and gender-based violence they face. So what we need is a more sensitivity and more responsiveness in the budget. And that is why the gender budget also is tuned to Women Empowerment Policy 2001, which has mandated all state governments and all union budget to scan the budget from the gender sensitivity point of view, and also each ministry and department should do this exercise, for which actors can be elected representatives. You can have a gender economist like us, myself, Arti, madam, and we have NGOs, elderly people's organization, Panchayati Raj institutions, corporations, all of them. So the demands of the people, voices of the people differ, whether they're children, child rights organizer, how much budget is allocated for children's welfare, how much is allocated for retired people, what is that allocation for youth, what is allocation for people with disability. Now all these, their voices of different sections of society, you need to take to the government. And it is a two-way communication between the state and non-state actors, which finally should contribute, ideally should contribute to the budgetary decisions. So we have seen that wherever the budgetary allocation is adequate, there is a judicious implementation. We have also seen the very empowering results. For example, Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. All of us are paying 2% professional tax at source. And we are not even cribbing about it. We are happy that every Indian should be healthy and every Indian should be educated. So that is that. And wherever we have seen budgetary cuts, for example, education has experienced budgetary cuts, which has reduced the opportunities for women in certain specialized courses like professional colleges where you want to go. You have to pay high fees. Parents are ready to invest in son's education, but not so much in daughter's education in several states, not in Bombay. But if you see the states be above Vindhyachal, all the northern states, parents are averse to investing in daughter's education because of the belief that investing in daughter is equal to watering neighbor's plant, no? Because she's going to go away to Sasural, she's going to go get. So we have seen that as the awareness about women's issues became more pronounced, we started that throughout the history of Planning Commission and the various plans, 12 plans, we saw increasing allocation for women, and especially after the 6th 5-year plan, which coincided with the discussion on the report, a very important report called Towards Equality, which was debated in the Parliament of India. So earlier we used to do critique of the budget after the budget was presented. Now, government and the state governments, several 18 state governments where the budget, gender budgeting has started, they invite gender economists like us to give the input on what kind of priorities the state should have. And there are four types of four categories: 100% budget, which is totally targeted to women. That means Department of Women and Child Development or the Ministry of Women and Child Development at the union level, or pro-women schemes, MG-NREGA or anti-poverty program, Prime Minister Sadak Yojana or PMY, the insurance scheme. At least 30% of the beneficiaries should be women. We have gender neutral schemes like a MG-NREGA or Integrated Village Development Scheme. There also both men and women and children and men and women and youth and elderly and people with disability, all of them benefit. Anybody can benefit. And sometimes you have a residual funds. For example, Fund of Disaster, Ministry of Disaster Management. If there is no disaster that particular year, the proposals can be sent to divert that fund for any other development sector. So we have seen that because of this awareness over the last 16 years, there have been more and more gender audit of the budget that has happened. Now, after giving this preliminary conceptual background, now let us come to Union Budget 22-23. The union budget, current union budget has followed supply side economics to promote state-sponsored capitalist development and subsidize the private sector by increasing capex, capital expenditure, by 35.4% from earlier, which was 5.54 lakh crore to 7.5 lakh crores, and effective capex seen at the 10.7 lakh crores for this financial year. The budget has increased revenue expenditure only by 1%. That means social sector in the current budget is a major casualty. The emergency credit line guarantee scheme for the medium and small scale industries for the industrialists has been expanded from 50,000 crore to 5 lakh crores. Top focus of the budget this year is a PM Gati Shakti, infrastructural development, productivity enhancement, sunrise opportunities, energy transition, climate, because now we are going to more and more for electrification of the transport sector, climate action, financing the investment, so strengthening the financial institutions. And every day we are hearing one scam after other scam, and even the National Stock Exchange scam currently, about which lot is being reported in the front page of all mainstream newspapers. They will be supported. Productivity linked incentive schemes for 14 sectors have received investment intention worth many worth I think 30 lakh crores. So I think that is also very noteworthy for us. Now, macroeconomic context setting in this this thing is very, very important in the current context, because there is a critical reflection on Union Budget 22-23 is very, very important to understand the implications of Union Budget after the pandemic. Like 2 years of onslaught of pandemic has triggered various socio-economic and educational challenges in the country. India ranked 131st out of 189 countries in a Human Development Index. The spending on social protection in India is now 1.4% of GDP, while the average low middle income countries, they're like other Asian countries, African countries, or Latin American countries, they have allocated minimum 2.5% of the GDP as per the World Social Protection Report 2021 of International Labour Organization. As per the Oxfam report, what we have seen which talks about inequality kills, that report has also shown that 84% of Indian households reported reduced income, while the wealth of 142 billionaire doubled in the pandemic times. Today's newspapers, all newspapers in the front page, they have also given the analysis of hunger report, which also I think corroborates the same kind of data. Unemployment and hunger has increased drastically. As per the periodic labor force survey, 68% of people earn less than 12,000 per month. State of Working in India report 2019 by the Center for Sustainable Employment of Azim Premji University in India, which also showed that 82% of men and 92% of women workers earn less than 10,000 per month, and also country has the highest rate of unemployment in last 20 years. Global Hunger Report 21 stated that India is in the India is the middle income country with widespread hunger, and India ranked 101st, that means 101 out of 116 countries in Global Hunger Index. In the ranking of United Nations Sustainable Development Goal Report, India ranked 121st out of 169 countries. That is much, much behind. Overall, India scored low in SDG 1, Sustainable Development Goal 1, which is dedicated to no poverty, Sustainable Development 2, zero hunger, Sustainable Development 4, quality of education, Sustainable Development Goal 5, gender equality, and Sustainable Development 10, which talks about reduction of inequality. Now, in this, India has counted very, very miserably low. Pandemic has triggered enormous human miseries. Over last 2 years, coronavirus pandemic triggered complete or practical lockdowns and partial lockdowns. They have resulted in unsurmountable human miseries marked by low real wages, mounting unemployment, increasing malnutrition, and increase in child marriages, child labor, gender-based violence, and adverse impact on education, health, food security for working class, poor, farmers, persons with disability, transgender community, and frontline workers. Now, in this socio-economic context, the topmost priority is the fiscal expansion for fund allocation for social sector that contributes to human development by improving food security, nutrition, health outcomes, access to education, and employment opportunities. Now, the least budgetary allocation to the social sector has become a major concern, and you must be reading, those who are reading Economic Times or Business Standard or Mint or Hindu or Indian Express and Times of India editorial pages, edit pages, you know that several economists, majority of the economists have suggested that there should be more allocation to social sector. Efforts have been made by the union budget to reduce fiscal deficit at the cost of social sector. And this has struck a death blow to the livelihood base of marginalized, including women. Unemployment crisis in which 6 million jobs have been lost as Indian economy contracted by 7.3%, while the global average is only 3.1% in 2020. The informal sector that contributed to 35% of output, 45% of export, and 92% of the workforce, the employment that has been left without any financial allocation in the union budget, current budget. The projected economic growth of 9% is envisaged as capital intensive, but accent on digital economy and financial technology, tech-enabled development, energy transition, e-commerce, artificial intelligence, drone technology, robotics, massive automation, that is taking away the lion's share of the budgetary allocation. Thus, it will continue to be a jobless growth. In this pandemic-induced economic downturn, the economic inequality gets compounded for all those who are facing intersectional marginalities along the lines of caste, religion, region, and gender. Even among the poor, women and transgender communities, persons with disabilities who are at the bottom of the pyramid of poverty and deprivation, I think they are neglected. COVID relief package of Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana has not been extended beyond March 2022. That means after a month, there is going to be a major crisis for the livelihood for the majority of population. How will Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission and National Telemental Health Project, they will be executed where majority of the people don't have access to digital technology? Now, coming to the question of health. Now, when it comes to allocation for health, you can see in this chart that health and family budget has also been reduced when it comes to percentage terms, though overall it is there is an increase, but as compared to the revised budget, there is a very, very minor increase. So COVID-19 vaccine transfer to the states where the union is providing the vaccine facilities, their budgetary allocation is reduced to 87%, where more than half of the Indian population has not got the second vaccine, and the booster is still a dream for majority of Indians. So health and nutrition concerns, given the unprecedented human calamity that the country faced during first three waves of COVID-19 pandemic in India, highly inadequate budgetary allocation for health facilities to protect lives of people becomes devastating, as from the pre-COVID days, also public health system was under-resourced. It was anticipated that union government would allocate significantly higher health budget for 22-23. As per the WHO directive, World Health Organization had requested all the nation states, 204 nation states, to enhance the budget by minimum 5% and maximum 10%, and many of our neighboring countries have done that. But the fund allocation to health and related programs is reduced in real terms in budget in the current budget. As percentage of GDP, the union government allocation to health budget has declined from 0.38% to 0.34%. That means as it is, it was less than 1%, and that has also been had declined. Share of health in total budget has declined from 2.35% to 2.26% as compared to previous year, and this is grossly inadequate, especially in the light of COVID pandemic. Health budget as a percentage of total budget is 2.26% only, which is lower than the previous year's health expenditure of 2.46% of the total expenditure. So government expenditure on health as a percentage of GDP it is reduced to only 0.35%, while the WHO has recommended that 5% of GDP must be allocated to public health by the nation states. So the union budget on health has also ignored the national health policy, because India adopted national health policies in 2017, and which promised that it would increase its budget, public health budget, to 2.5% of the GDP by 2025. We are in 2022, and still it remains only 0.35% of GDP. Now, allocation towards education sector, if we see that in that also, we can see the reduction over last 5 years. If we compare the budget, and currently we need more budget mainly because of the online education. More than 3 crore children are out of school. More than 1 crore girls are out of school because of no access to digital connectivity, and also the smartphone. If you have one smartphone, it goes to brother, not to sister. So in this context, last mile connectivity for online education was very, very important, and children have already suffered in last 2 years in terms of quality of education. So the budgetary allocation on education, according to Economic Survey 2021, the expenditure on education by union government as a proportion of GDP has been around 33% between 2014 to 19. The National Education Policy recommended that 6% of GDP should be allocated for education. And even in 1968, Kothari Commission had recommended 6%, and even the current 2020 policy has also recommended the same. In education, most of the union budget allocation is going towards creating digitalization, as per the announcement by Finance Minister. One class, one TV channel initiative. The scholarship for higher education for scheduled caste has declined from 450 crore to 364 crore. Pre-matric scholarship for scheduled caste and others have declined from 375 crore to 500 crore. And there has been an overall increase of allocation of education sector, but emphasize on digital classroom, but no budget for increasing employment of teachers, because there is a tremendous shortage of teachers. I'll just pick up water to drink. Hello, am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Now, coming to the question of livelihood, because the people who are in the rural and tribal areas and even the urban working class, I think livelihood is a very, very important challenge that we have faced, especially when most of the cities are 60% of the migrant population. As you know, we all saw the human misery immediately after 1 month of lockdown, that the kind of livelihood crisis that people were on the roads, they had no money to pay rent, and so much of community kitchens had to be started by local self-government bodies. So currently there is a major crisis in livelihoods. So allocation of Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Scheme, MG Narega, which saved so many families during the pandemic because of the reverse migration, there was a great demand for the MG Narega scheme. But here what we see is that MG Narega could, and even with the last year, like 2020-21 budget, the MG Narega fund, most of the states had exhausted MG Narega funds before 6 months, because the demand for employment was so high. And they could not even provide 100 days of employment as per the promise of the act. But they could hardly provide 50 days of work. In several states, the allocation of last year enabled state governments to give only 50% of work. Reduction in MG Narega will have devastating impact on rural poor. There is no comprehensive urban employment scheme provided by the union budget to address burning problem of 40% of the urban youth, which is unemployed currently. Budget has, as per the CMI, Center for Monitoring Indian Economy data, because we don't have census data now, because the 21 census could not be conducted due to lockdown and the pandemic situation. The budget has mentioned startups and development of rural enterprises, rural employment, and the use of drone technology in rural areas. But it is silent about support services to the farmers. Budget is silent about rural and tribal women's unpaid work, about collection of fuel, fodder, water, animal care, kitchen gardening, collection of forest and huge care, forest produce, and the huge care burden because of the illnesses. The care burden of children, elderly, and the sick family members is shouldered by women of the household. Except for extending Ujjwala scheme for 1 lakh users, which is grossly inadequate in the coverage, no support to ease the unpaid care burden of women is provided in terms of support social services. State-run housing at the affordable rent for migrant workers must be given top priority by the the painful experiences of reverse migration, because private sector is not going to give low rent housing. We are not talking about the ownership, but we are only talking about the rental place for the migrant workers, and where the state has to take major. And we know that whether you go to Bangladesh or Philippines, countries poorer than us, there also you have a state supported housing program. Coming to the question of children's budget, because now the children's organization for past 15 years have been all doing budget audit. They examine the budget from the lens of children. बच्चों के चश्मे से वो अपने budget को देखते हैं. Now here also the child rights organizations, Haq Center for Child Rights, which is a Delhi-based organization, has done the budget analysis, and they have shown that right from 2013 there has been continuous decline in the budget for children's education, children's health, welfare of street children, children in conflict with law, children in difficult circumstances, what you call abolition of child labor, because children who are brought out of child servitude or in a very hazardous work condition, they don't want to go to their parents, because again they will be sold as child labor. So state like Andhra Pradesh, after freeing the child labor, the state took the responsibility of looking after these children. So the share of funds for children in the union budget is the lowest now as compared to previous budgets. And this is the time where the children are suffering the most, because massive child labor has increased massively, child prostitution has increased, trafficking of children for a slave labor has also increased drastically. Now, budget for children, when it comes to children, are given the lowest allocation in the union budget in the last 1 decade. Budget allocations earmarked for benefit of children have remained below 2.35% of the total budget. And according to the analysis of report, as I showed in the previous graph, that Haq Center for Child Rights, which is a non-profit organization. And the current budget also, child protection has received only 0.04%, because this is the time where children are in a tremendous distress. You know that National Commission for Women itself declared that more than 375,000 children made distress call on the helpline 1098. And out of which 25% were adolescent girls who were being trafficked and who were being sold and who were forced into marriage. Okay, so this is the time we need a major state initiative for child welfare. So the overall allocation for child protection remains only 1,574 crores. And it is noteworthy to mention here that percentage share of union budget allocated for welfare of children has been reduced from previous year also, from 3.6% to 2.46%. Now, this is the lowest share of the budget for the welfare of children in last 11 years. Now, coming to the fund allocation for scheduled caste special component plan for scheduled caste, and the tribal sub plan for the tribal communities. Now, 11% of the population of our country lives in the forest. They are tribal people. They collect more than 700 types of forest produce, which are used by the pharma industries, and also the tenduli, which is used by the cigarette industry, and so many important herbs and forest fruits and various roots that they collect. They were not able to sell them because of the pandemic. There is a tremendous hunger, starvation, and livelihood crisis in the tribal hamlets all over the country. Now, under the Statement 10A and the Statement 10B, respectively, the union government allocates an additional budget under Scheduled Caste Plan for Scheduled Caste, under TSP for the Scheduled Tribes. In the Union Budget 22-23, there has been an increase in absolute number of SCP and TSP, but when it comes to percentage, you can see the reduction. 3.61% for SCP and 2.26% for TSP of the entire budget of the Union government. It mentions how two schemes related to Safai Karmacharis, that means a scheme for self-employment and rehabilitation, for which during previous year, we had a 16.6 crores was spent out of total allocation of 110. So even when the money is allocated, there is a tremendous non-utilization due to bureaucratic lethargy and no sensitivity towards Safai Karmacharis who suffered the most in terms of COVID infection. They were dealing with the waste, solid waste and the organic waste, but still the money remained unutilized. When it comes to the rehabilitation under self-employment scheme, no efforts were made, and their services were used for managing the corona pandemic. Union budget in the previous year allocated 100 crores, which was slashed to 43 crore in the current budget, because anytime the money remains unutilized, you have to, the next year you would see the money is slashed. The allocation is slashed. So the 2022-23 budget allocated only 72 crores for sanitary workers who have suffered the most during last 2 years. As there are no clear-cut earmarking of funds under specific budget heads by the nodal ministry, which is Social Justice and Empowerment, which has not uploaded any detailed demand for grant on its website from the year 2010 to 20. So you can see the aversions, you can see the insensitivity of the ministry towards the plight of Safai Karmacharis and people who are, and now with urbanization, we are creating so much of waste. And the people who are managing this waste, even when the money is parked in the ministry, it doesn't get utilized, because even for the funds which is there, you have to send the proposal. So the bureaucrats in the ministry have not done that work because of their insensitivity to the plight of Safai Karmacharis. The union budget has extended emergency credit line guarantee scheme for the MSMEs, and which is a 5 lakh crores, but doesn't provide any infrastructure for marketing of the products. Currently, those who declare themselves as self-employed, you must have seen earlier those who were employed in the gym or a beauty parlor or any other service sector, elderly care or child care, during pandemic, they all became unemployed. Many of them have now become self-employed. They provide dabbas, they provide various, they make their things and use the various e-commerce portals to sell their product. The Dalit women, mostly in the nano, they are not even in small scale, they are in the nano and micro enterprises and have been self-employed Dalit women. They had to face severe hardships and were forced to shut down their units permanently and are currently surviving by casual wage work. So from self-employed people, now they have become casual workers. And their budget announcement for financial support to 130 lakh MSMEs to be benefited as per the budget announcement. But there is no sensitivity shown to what these women who were earlier self-employed, who are in the nano and micro sector, what will they do? So the capital intensive infrastructure and construction industries have been granted major boost by the union budget, but they will not generate more employment. Hence, the large majority of workforce will have to languish in a low-wage, unregulated, informal sector, as either as casual workers or doing extremely hazardous work which no one is ready to do. Now, coming to the budget for religious minorities, allocation of only 0.23% of the total budget through the Ministry of Minority Affairs. Minority in our country, minorities are defined as Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, Jain, Parsis. They are considered as minorities, out of which Buddhist and Muslims, among them the poverty rate is very, very high, more than average Indian poverty. When the religious minorities in India, if you say their composition in the population is 19.3%. So if all Buddhist, Muslim, Christian, Jain, Parsis, if you combine together, they constitute 19.3% of India's population. They have demanded from the central government to allocate 1 lakh crore, adding that extremely low allocation comes even as current budget of 22 lakhs 4,000 and 422 crore, where there is an increase to the tune of 23% as compared to the last year. So overall budgetary allocation has increased, but what we see that the Ministry of Minority Affairs is given only 5,000 crores, which is an increase of only 4%. So compare the overall increase of 23% with the 4% to minorities. There has been a reduction of 8.58 crore in the budget for special programs for minorities, basically targeting education, skill development, employment generation, enterprise development. There has been reduction. 1 crore reduction in the budget of Qawmi Waqf Board Progressive Scheme, because Waqf Board is a nodal agency for the Muslim population. Reduction of 41 crore in the Nai Manzil scheme, which was for the address to the youth employment and the youth skilling program. There is a shortfall of 5.5 crore in the Maulana Azad Foundation that has been virtually abolished. Provision of only 1 lakh crore is made for it, and there is a reduction of 14 crore in the educational scheme for minorities and madrasas. There is a 41.67 crore shortfall of social security, a reduction of 41 crore in the skill development of the minorities, and there is a no increase in the interest subsidy scheme of education loan. If my children from minority community take education loan, there is no interest subsidy is not provided. Preparation for the scheme for competitive exams, special scheme for preparation of UPSC, because that is what the Sachar committee had recommended. Rajendra Sachar committee had recommended in their report, socio-economic backwardness among Muslims in India. In 2007, we have Ministry of Minority. After that, the Ministry of Minority Affairs was established. But you have a ministry, but minus any funds, functions, and functionaries. So the research under special programs for minority scheme, all that have been, there is a major slashing of the budget, and as a result, the organizations of minority communities, they have considered this budget extremely discriminatory towards them. Coming to now gender budget. If you see, gender budget started, the exercise started in our country, and the first gender budget was provided by Ministry of Women and Child Development. finance ministry in 2005-6, and you can see that there has been only in 2000 or 2021 there was a 1%, over 1% of budgetary allocation. But throughout the history of gender budgeting, the allocation for gender budgeting has been less than 1%. It was 0.67% in the first year, and now it is 0.69%. So the United Nations had recommended that minimum 6% of GDP should be for the gender concerns, because it touches the lives of more than 50% population. So over last 3 weeks, we have seen that gender economists and women's rights activists have been debating this highly masculine budget that has completely overlooked the main gender concerns. That means widening gap in the health and well-being. There is a tremendous, NFHS 5 report has shown there is a tremendous deterioration of the nutritional standard of women and children over last 2 years of pandemic. Education gap has increased. In even most of the women's university and women's colleges are also saying that they get nearly 25 to 40% of the students have come back because of the pandemic, and because of the online education, many of them did not have that facility. The employment, 40% of women who lost their job during pandemic, they are not even back to the field of, they are not getting any employment. In this last 2 years, so many industries have become more capital intensive because of the demand of social isolation and the physical body distancing. Many MSMEs are also going for massive automation, and the major casualty is women's employment. Deplorable condition of healthcare workers such as Anganwadi workers and Asha workers who have been the main backbone of the public health system in the midst of pandemic. Whether it is question of vaccination program, or whether it is contact tracing, or whether it is RC-PCR test, or whether it is looking after the patients in the COVID centers, they have played a very important role. We are applauding them as a corona warriors and a heroine of pandemic crisis. But still, when it comes to giving them even the minimum wage of the state, which is not given, they are treated as a volunteer, they are treated as and given honorarium, measly honorarium. Self-employed women in nano and micro enterprises and pandemic-triggered gender-based violence, which has increased from 3 times to 10 times in different parts of the country. Trafficking of girls and women, forced child marriages due to more than 1 crore girls who are forced out of school, and also the digital divide which is being created. Now, proportion of gender budget for the 5 ministries which are very important: Ministry of Women and Child Development, which is 100% budget is allocated to women and children. Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, where the reproductive and child health budget goes to women and children. Ministry of Rural Development, the NREGA, before pandemic, major beneficiary of NREGA used to be women in more than 7 to 8 states, all southern states and the western part of India. Ministry of Human Resource Development, which deals with the education sector, and there also it impacts women's lives a great deal, both in school and college education and university education. And Ministry of Agriculture and Farm Sector. Now, these are the 5 ministries which impact lives of women greatly, but still you can see that the gender budget in that is very, very limited when it comes to only Ministry of Women and Child Development, which is a mandate of 100% allocation to women. Beyond that, we see that in all other ministries, the percentage beneficiaries are extremely low, and especially in the farm sector. At one level, Food and Agriculture Organization says that future of farm sector lays in the hands of women. Women are the future. Women are the provide the food security and food sovereignty. All the subsistence sector which provides us grains is managed by women. Men are in the cities, they are the migrant workers, their women are managing the field. But still, the schemes and programs targeting women are only 4% of GDP goes to women farmers. They are not even treated as farmers. They are treated as a farmer's wives, or farmer's daughter, or farmer's mother, or farmer's widow. Even after becoming widow, she is not treated by the state as a farm, but given an all government schemes, all government subsidies, and the support is linked to Kisan card. So women don't have Kisan card. Unless you own land, you don't get. So only 8% of Indian women in agriculture sector own land. The land is in their name. So majority of women who are working as cultivators, agriculture laborers, farmers, and poor peasants, none of them have a Kisan card. The gender budget has, in absolute term, it is increased, but in percentage of total expenditure, it has reduced. And what we see is that currently as this graph shows, that overall percentage has gone down. The part A, there are two parts in gender budgeting. Part A is 100% allocation for women, which is allocated to One Stop Crisis Center, Mahila Police Volunteer, Women Helpline, Swadhar, Ujjwala Gas Cylinder Scheme, Widows Home. Now there also we see that there has been a reduction. You can see that there are two, the Samarth aspect, which is called part A is a Samarth aspect, Beti Bachao, Pradhan Mantri Matru Vanjana Yojana. There also see a reduction. And second aspect is Sambal aspect, which is Sambal and Samarth, which combined together become Mission Shakti. So even in Mission Shakti, what we see, there is only marginal increase of 100 crores. Part B of the gender budgeting, which covers the schemes where at least 30% of allocation is for women, which includes schemes with significant focus on women. Basically, the question, all those Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana, National Urban Livelihood Mission, Ministry of Rural Development's budget, National Rural Livelihood Mission Ajivika program, and MG Narega. In that also we see there has been reduction. Women are a large number of beneficiaries of the schemes, like a National Social Assistance Program, Narega, schemes for welfare of SC, ST, minorities, and other vulnerable sections. So the combined expenditure on all the scheme is reduced from 3.2% to 2.5%. So it is when it comes to, say, the for capital goods, budget has given tariff protection, but it is silent about support to women and the farm sector. In fact, MG Narega generally in every budget speech, the finance minister always mentions this is for the first time that none of the schemes of social sector have been even mentioned in the finance minister's speech. That shows that it is given low significance. Schemes under gender responsive budgeting in last one decade were a very important conditional maternity benefit scheme to provide cash directly to pregnant and lactating mothers in the poverty groups, National Mission for Empowerment of Women, schemes for leadership development of minority women, Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, crash scheme for working parents, rehabilitation of trafficked women and children, Nirbhaya fund for the survivors of violence, and also need for recognition of women's centrality in all the anti-poverty programs, whatever 40-50 schemes we have in that. So the major concerns of the social sector the organizations fighting for the rights of increasing the budget of social sector, are that the budget is totally silent on the concerns of social protection. That means policies and programs designed to reduce poverty, vulnerability by promoting efficient labor markets, diminishing people's exposure to risk, enhancing their capacity to protect themselves against hazards and interruptions and loss of income. And the are and will be poor, informal sector workers, farmers, forest dwellers, sexual minorities, persons with disabilities, and in all these categories, women and girls. Cruel fiscal policy that levies minimum corporate tax and doesn't allow fiscal expansion for increasing purchasing power of the masses, even after knowing that there is a and it's a good economics, no? Putting money in the hands of people at current place where the economy has slowed down is very important. So the hike in the price of gas cylinder and diesel fuel, also inflationary pressure, skyrocketing inflation in essential goods for day-to-day survival of common masses have put curb on the nutritious diet, education, access to health, clean and safe fuel. There has been digital divide, which is a major challenge. Integrated child development program and midday meal programs were stopped due to pandemic, which has affected nutrition standard, malnutrition among children and pregnant women. Children's rights organization are concerned about increasing child labor, child trafficking, and also homeless street children. Migrant workers, women in informal sector and other deprived sections in the rural areas are reporting that the new normal will never be normal for them. PM Kisan Yojana is limited to only land-owning class, and among them, only 8% are women. The job days under MG Narega is a lifeline. MG Narega is a lifeline for the BPL population. They have fallen with reduction in fund allocation, and from over 1,11,000 crore to only 73,000 crores. FM did not even mention the scheme in her budget speech, and the former governor of RBI, Dr. Subbarao, stated that budget is great on growth, but not on job. So it is not creating job. Another important major concern that we have is the social expenditure on PDS is highly inadequate and reduced to only 1,45,920 crores in the current budget, and it was nearly double. It was 2,10,000 crores last year. This is a deplorable as worst impact of last 2 years of pandemic is a mass hunger and malnutrition. Almost every day we are reading in the newspapers the data by different think tanks and different research organizations about the hunger and malnutrition in our country. The majority of Indian population is reeling under debt, pawning assets. The micro studies, area studies, rapid assessment studies throughout the country are showing people are pawning their assets. They are selling off their homes, they are selling off their gold, they are selling off their silver, they are selling off their land, mainly to survive. Women are at the bottom of the poverty pyramid. Health and education costs have really shot up exponentially in the post-pandemic period. Mind-boggling challenges in education. How will our children and young adults get solid foundational education when public expenditure on education is only around 3% of GDP? National Education Policy also has recommended 6% of GDP. NEP has reaffirmed this recommendation, and also experts have recommended that looking at the pandemic triggered stoppage of education to over 12 crore students in India who are out of school since March 2020. Recently, only the schools and colleges have opened. The public investment in education should be 6% of GDP. Budget doesn't address the rising inequality in the society. The union budget is facilitating state capitalism in a race to subsidize super rich, and whole of social sector and gender responsive budgeting has taken backseat. Over 84% of families have suffered, their incomes have suffered. SC, ST, sexual minorities, poor people, informal sector workers are suffering. So the demand, it is in this context that the social organizations, community-based organizations, civil society organizations, women's groups, children's organizations, farmers' organizations, workers' rights organizations, and trade unions have vociferously demanded that to safeguard the constitutional right to life with dignity, it is very important. It is imperative that this government must address malnutrition and anemia by strengthening universalization of public distribution system. Currently, only one state has universalized PDS, that is Kerala. Those who are rich, they are not going to go to ration shop. They are going to buy from the open market. But universalization is the best equalizer. Budget should create massive opportunities for women's work and safe and secure work environment for making substantial public sector investment for education and health. Demands of the CBOs and NGOs and women's rights and child rights organization is that MG Narega, Anganwadi cum creche scheme, national creche scheme, they should be heavily funded. Central government for pension scheme, those who are elderly people, the pension scheme where the union budget gives only 200 per person should be increased to 2,000 per person. Wages of all workers providing care work, that means Anganwadi workers, helpers, ASHA workers should be enhanced, and the decent working conditions should be provided. So there is a need for provision of composite programs for women and girls also in all the flagship programs of education, health, and employment. And disaggregated data is very important. What we need is a disaggregated data. Currently, all economists, all statisticians, they are now they are demanding that what we need is a robust data. Without robust data, we can't target our government expenditure. So what we need is a data on work participation. We need on how many are migrant workers, how rural migration, rural urban migration, urban rural migration, inter-district migration, reverse migration. We need data. Labor Ministry has to provide sectoral distribution of workforce in the economy. How many women farmers are there, and are they? How do make them included in the state supported programs? Out of school children, what is that, how many of them are there in different states in our country? What is the strength currently percentage and number of child labor in our country? Gender based violence, what types of violence? National Crime Records Bureau is providing the data. Unemployment and underemployment, malnutrition, morbidity, and also the sectoral distribution of various types of needs and demands that we have. And this gender gap in 5 important areas: economic participation, economic opportunity, political empowerment, educational attainment, health and well-being, and how many are there in the decision-making bodies. I think that is very important. And there are still so many unresolved issues when it comes to gender budgeting, like a widow's pension. Should we give just giving 800 rupees to a widow? Is it going to solve the problem, or we need to make far more important intervention in terms of creation of halfway homes, community centers, counseling centers for them? Because currently we are hearing a lot about COVID widows and COVID orphans. What kind of support do we provide? Public transport only is very, very important. After Nirbhaya tragedy, the question of safe public transport has become extremely important. Housing for migrant, and especially in that also allocation for migrant workers. We have 12 crore Indian migrant workers as per 2011 census, and out of which 3 crore migrant workers are women who work in the service sector, who work in the IT industry, who work in the as a domestic workers. Financial inclusion of poor by banks. They should be the financial sharks and the loan sharks should be disciplined. They can't charge 25%, 32%, 42% rate of interest, which is creating tremendous indebtedness among the poverty groups. No clarity on women's component in the allocation for education, water, health, sanitation, public toilets, housing, insurance, skill development, whether it's a Skill India, Startup India, Stand Up India. Why aren't women being able to benefit from that? And why even in the startup sector, women never get supported. Even if their proposal is robust, a bank would not consider them bankable or credit worthy because of the gender bias. Underpayment of women workers, ASHA and NRHM workers, Anganwadi workers, and absence of gender-friendly approach in the Skill India mission. Financial support to women entrepreneurs. We have only 7% of the entrepreneurs, overall entrepreneurs are women, and they are only in the nano and micro sector, not even in small sector. Very few are in small sector. So I think there is a tremendous support is required, and supportive scheme for transgender people, their education, their health, their housing, their skill development, so that they can be employed. So we have seen that wherever there has been participation, decision-making power among Panchayati Raj institutions, we have 50% reserved seats for women in Panchayati Raj institutions in more than 20 states, and where these women have really address the genuine needs without any corruption and leakage. That's what the NIRD, National Institute of Rural Development, and UNDP report have said. And that's why it is very important to empower people who are at the front. That means state governments and the local self-government who are actually facing the challenges of pandemic and also doing their area development. They need to be supported. Another very important challenge we face is the underutilization and non-utilization of fund, which is allocated to different ministries, for which citizens, bureaucrats, elected representatives, and the economists will have to be very, very alert, because money is there. Why isn't it used? Well, whether there is something wrong in the design of the scheme, or whether it is not channelized, or if there is a bureaucratic lethargy, or nobody is the politicians are not emphasizing that fund should be utilized. That is very important. So we need to be very, very proactive as a citizen, as a teacher, as a student, uh, uh, as a local community people, that we must and be responsible to take interest in the budgetary discussions. Budget garners resources through taxation and policies, allocates these resources to different sections of the economy and different sections of society and different sectors of the economy. It is an important tool in the hands of our government, our state, for affirmative action, for improving gender relations between the rich and poor, and also reduce the economic inequalities, social inequalities in our country. There have been several attempts made in certain pockets, like bottom-up budget. In Karnataka, two economists started bottom-up, but they would sit with the community, come out with the micro plan, and put in figures and take it to the state government for creating the resources for the villages or areas or the communities. In Rajasthan, they have experimented with the green budget, how to reduce desertification and how to create water bodies and how to create greenification. That is a very important initiative we saw. Gender budgeting is now happening in several parts of the world. Learning from the Right to Pee campaign in Mumbai, it was 40 NGOs. They came together and they took initiative in creation of a sanitary facilities in the city of Mumbai. We have 2,300 toilets for men in our country, in the public places in Mumbai city. 23 toilet blocks are there for men, but there are hardly 111 toilet blocks, and that too, they are unusable because they are not maintained for women, with an understanding that women are basically homemakers. They are at home. They don't need public toilets, which is not true. Brown reality is very different. So they have taken initiative. It is called Right to Pee campaign, which is started by Coro for Literacy organization in Mankud, and they are very active. And now there are 1,800 community-based organizations in Greater Mumbai who have joined them, and there are women managers in the toilet blocks in the bastis. They are fighting. So it is very important that once our sensitivity to these issues increase, then we start taking responsible position for connecting our local reality with the macro policies. So local and global implications of pro-poor budgeting, gender budgeting, creates the alternative macro scenario emerging out of alternative budgets, interlinkages between the gender-sensitive budget, social sector budget, and the empowerment of the community. A serious examination of budget calls for greater transparency at the level of international economics, whether it is a World Bank or it is IMF. For the first time, at least they are saying that you should invest in social sector. Okay, that is the advice which I think Dr. Gopinath, our Indian economist, who is the chief economic advisor to IMF, also suggested. Everyone is talking of fiscal expansion, why it is important in current scenario. So there is a need to provide training and capacity building workshops for decision makers in the government structures, for the local and at all levels, local, regional, national, and global level. We have to dialogue with the parliamentarians and also the audiovisual media about this. So social protection, which is very important. So budget for social security or budget for on social protection, they are very, very important. And that's why now I come to the resources I have used. You can watch all this. I've given the links of very important films made in countries poorer than us, like Brazil or Timor-Leste or Indonesia, Morocco, Bangladesh, even India. There are 3 examples. One example is of Kutumbashree in Kerala, which played a very important role. Anytime there is disaster in Kerala, Kutumbashree is the network which does the disaster management very judiciously, efficiently. There is also the example of Mysore, how they reduce the maternal mortality by very effective use of public health budget. So those case studies are also there in these films. And these are some of the references I have used for this presentation. This is a painting by a boy in Kerala. he was in 8th standard, and when everyone said that women don't do anything, and his mother, he always watched his mother doing so many chores, like looking after cattle, cooking, cleaning, bringing water, or looking after the farm. His mother died. He's looked after by his father, who is a painter. And when there was an international competition of painting, this boy Anujat, he drew this painting, and he got a first prize in the world. And now this painting is the cover page of gender responsive budgeting of Kerala government for 2021-22. Last year's budget, it had a cover. So I have used this budget. So thank you for giving me opportunity to speak on this neglected area. And I would stop sharing.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such a lovely session, for giving us so many different perspectives of how budget can affect and would affect us. And madam, we really liked your style of delivery. It was so simple and simple to understand, simple to relate with. Thank you so much for this. And now I invite Dr. Rizvi to propose the vote of thanks, the formal vote of thanks.
Thank you, Aarti ma'am. It is a great honor to propose the vote of thanks to all who have helped us in making national webinar such as resounding success. First and foremost, I would like to thank our management for encouraging us for conducting such knowledge sharing event. I would like to thank our distinguished speaker, Dr. Vibhuti Patel, for making an excellent presentation on said theme. Thank you, ma'am, for your very interesting and thought-produced address. I would like to express our profound gratitude to our principal, Dr. Gajanan Vade, and Vice Principal, Mrs. Deepika Sharma, for their support to the webinar. I would like also thanks to Dr. Rinku Shantanu, Dr. Aarti Sukeja, and Ms. Pranati for organizing this event. I am happy to express my thanks to all the staff who helped to make this webinar a grand success. I would like to thank Professor Ramya and her team for technical support. I would like to thank our wonderful students who have turned up in such a great number, not only from our department, but also from other departments of our college. Thank you so much for your cooperations. Dear, feedback link is posted in the chat box. Participants are requested to fill
Is
the
YouTube link also posted on the chat box, sir?
Yeah, just a minute. Pranati, are you there?
Yes,
Yeah. Can you post?
sir, I will talk to the
Okay,
student.
just give me 1 second. I'll post.
It
Just
is
give
there
me-
on the poster, but we are unable to copy it.
Okay, sir, I will post it.
Just give me 1 second.
Yeah.
Thank you, Vibhuti ma'am, for such an excellent session. Yes.
So you are into Shantanu.
Yeah, I'm Rinki Chandra. Rizvi sir, please post the link at YouTube.
Yeah. I'm doing that only.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Vibhuti ma'am.
Thank you.
We enjoyed the session.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Rizvi, are we taking a group photo?
Yeah, I think you'll have to. All you will have to. Yeah.
Yes.
They will have to. Yeah.
Yeah. Please, everyone,
on there.
please turn on your camera.
Rizvi, you're taking or Rinku is taking?
Let Rizvi sir take, huh? He will do it a bit again.
Yeah.
He is good in all this.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take.
Yeah, we'll need for your recorders.
Yes, done.
Rizvi, we can ask everybody to keep their cameras on, no?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Everybody can keep their cameras on. We're taking a photo of the event.
Jafar, please turn on your camera.
All the students, please put your camera on immediately.
Yeah, done.
That. Link is here. No?
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
your time.
Yeah.
And see you soon, ma'am. See you soon again, ma'am, on offline mode.
Yeah, offline I won't come. The Viva has to be online. I won't.
Okay, ma'am. Okay.
I've just recovered from Omicron. I don't want to
Yes,
be.
yes, ma'am. How are you now? Better, ma'am?
Yeah, but stamina is gone. I feel very exhausted. Home-based work I can do. So please tell them that online. Huh?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
This is the
Please
second
take
time.
care.
Because I had in first wave, I had COVID. This time it's Omicron. So
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much.
you can have it soon, no problem. Yeah.
Yes, yes,
First
ma'am.
March is also fine for me. Yes.
Okay, okay, ma'am.
First March.
Okay, Rizvi, then we officially close the event.
Yeah.
Thank
Yes,
you,
ma'am.
ma'am. Bye, ma'am.
Bye.
Bye, ma'am.